Hello and welcome to the Brothers of Dynasty, the best fantasy football podcast hosted by three brothers from Rhode Island who have all been watching Squid Games. Well, two of us have been watching Squid Game. It's me and Andrew. Also, side note, guys, I have some new ideas for our Eliminator League next year that I want to run past you offline, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, so I can't comment.
Wait, how are
You
we
don't even know
pairing
the premise, Jay?
No, I know.
God,
Yeah, if
can
you've
we
been
be
on
gonzos?
Twitter, you know the premise. I haven't been living under a rock. I know it. I know about the show. I just haven't seen it yet.
Okay, that's great. Good. You should watch it. Get on it, Jay. It's terrific. I'm your host, Josh Christensen, joined as always by my brothers, Jay and Andrew. Jay, what are you drinking today?
I'm drinking another IPA. This one's called All My Best Friends Are Hopheads, which is true. They all are. And this is a collaboration between Armada Brewing and Beard Brewing. And it's a double IPA, 8.5%. So it's a big boy.
Ooh. Andrew, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking an old favorite, Whaler's Rise. This guy. But actively drinking out of a Buttonwoods Brewery glass. I'm still trying to get used to this.
Okay, Buttonwoods Brewery, you owe us money at this point for this earned media.
Unbelievable.
It's ridiculous. Three or four shows in a row. Just all about Buttonwoods Brewery. Buttonwoods Brewery, get at us. You owe us ad money. What am I drinking, you ask? I'm actually drinking a beer today, and it's a Gansett, buddy.
You spared no expense.
Oh, you went to a bodega.
I did go to a bodega. Howdy, neighbor. It's not howdy, neighbor. It's hi, neighbor. Have yourself a Gansett.
That's what they say.
That is what they say.
On the can.
Reading the can. Yep.
That's what we always do. Anyways, on today's episode, we are breaking down week 6 in the NFL, and it was a week to forget. I feel like This is the rough part of the season, especially coming up in week 7 where there's like the best fantasy teams on bye, all of them. So there's going to be some bloodbaths out there. But we will go through week 6 storylines as we have done every week with our mock draft style, 12 picks. We'll start with Jay this week, then go to me, and then go to Andrew at the 103, and then we'll rotate back through those, picking through the various storylines of week 6. So Jay, why don't you kick us off with your 101 pick?
Yeah, it's slim pickings this week. Now, there's good storylines, but man, injuries, we got bye weeks. It's awful. But I'm going to start with, I guess, a positive story. This is a guy I wanted to talk about. We saw this guy on Sunday night. Deontay Johnson is a guy I wanted to highlight this week because we saw a little bit of a change there in Pittsburgh, obviously, with Juju going out with the injury 2 weeks ago. So we wanted to see how it would shake out. They had a nice matchup with Seattle. And Johnson was the one that stood out the most in terms of who I think he already was a target monster. It's only can go up so far. How many targets can this guy get? But he basically was the guy this week in terms of targets. And when you look back overall and compare him to some of the guys that we hold in a higher tier in terms of fantasy, the guys like Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, he's right there in terms of target share, and it hasn't changed this year. If we go back to 2020, he was 6th basically overall in targets, a guy that averaged 9.27 targets a game, whereas a guy who was at the top, Devontae Adams, averaged 10.43. Flash forward to this year, he's doing the same thing. He averages 10 targets a game, which is good for around 6th overall. And only once again in the conversation with Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Calvin Ridley. These are the guys that he is in the conversation with in targets, and targets get you receptions, which get you fantasy points. And he's so involved with that team, and I only think it's even more stable without Juju there. Claypool's involved as well, but he struggled this past week. He really kind of was a ghost there. Kind of unconnected with Big Ben. Big Ben's kind of the worry because it's kind of everything hinges on whether he can throw, but he just seems to be able to get it to Johnson. That's the constant. And then going forward, I don't see that changing. So my thought with him was where do we see him rest of season and also in the dynasty landscape? Is this a guy that should be top 12 even in dynasty rankings going forward? He's only 25. That target share is huge. The question mark would be, do they get another quarterback next year? But it's a guy that when you have that target share with those guys, he just seems to be super valuable for a contender. And then a guy that you can kind of build your wide receiver core around going forward. And not to mention his ADOT went up this year too. He's averaging 11.59 depth of targets. That's nice to go along with those targets. So just a guy I want to get your thoughts on. Where do you see him rest of the year? Is this a great guy to have on a championship, guy going for the championship? And do you think he can sneak into top 12 when you're looking at a dynasty wide receiver rankings?
Yeah, no, I think you're right on with just that pure target share that he has. Like you said, averaging 10 targets a game. There's really only one game this year that he had much like there's this random 2-target game. Of course, he sort of pulled it out by being 2 for 72. And that's really nice when you're sort of missing out on the targets, but you pull out a quick score to kind of salvage your week. But other than that, looking at 10, 12, 13, and 13, like he's pulling in like upwards of a dozen every week, and that gives him that opportunity to go off every week. That type of consistency is what you want in your wide receiver ones. And I'd have to pull it up real quick, but I mean, where is he falling at the moment? Like
wide receiver 11 on a points per game basis so far this year.
So he's already there.
I was just thinking, how do you rank? Like, does he rank there? Like going forward, we're dynasty, so it's like, how are you ranking him? And I was starting to compare him to guys like Chris Godwin or Keenan Allen or Terry McLaurin, and it's like I think he's right there, and I almost might prefer him in some spots to, maybe a Chris Godwin or Keenan Allen in age wise. Keenan Allen's pushing 30. Deontay's a little, and they're very.
I guess that's it. Whether we're,
Yeah,
you probably want to err for him against a Keenan Allen from a dynasty perspective, but from rest of season even, it seems like that consistency's there. I'm not saying Los Angeles is going to do what they did this past week every week. That's definitely more of an anomaly because no one really feasted this week in that offense. But yeah, Keenan sort of balancing things out with Mike Williams and Austin Eckler. And it seems like Deontay is not really competing with anyone too much over in that Pittsburgh offense. I know there's Claypool, but they seem to serve very different roles, so I don't think they cannibalize each other much.
Yeah, and of the two roles that they play, one is suited to Ben's current physical or lack thereof physical gifts, and that's Deontay Johnson. Like the Claypool can operate on multiple levels of the field, but it seems like when it comes to those short yardage throws, it's Deontay, and now it's Najee Harris, who again had, I believe, 5 or 6 receptions in this game as well. And
Claypool's just not as good at that range yet, too, probably in the crispness of his routes.
Yeah, I mean that's something. Especially we've seen that a lot with guys who are in that 6'4" range. Also, I apologize, my dog's going crazy right now, and and Liz isn't here, so I have to watch her. But she's just barking away at something. I don't really know. She'll settle down in a minute. But anyways, back to my point. Yeah, Claypool. We've seen that with guys who are like 6'4" and above, like that kind of ability to create separation off the release in short routes. And now, like, he's certainly super athletic. He gets down the field, obviously, with that long speed. He has a good release, but he doesn't have the same like shiftiness that in the way that Deontay Johnson has, or the way that Juju had too in those underneath routes too. So I think that's going to take a little bit of development of him getting savvier with head fakes and stuff like that, because he's not going to be able to get in and out of his cuts as well as a smaller guy. It's the case for DK. It's the case for any guy of that size. That's just kind of the trade-off with that kind of athleticism and physicality. But let's move to our next subject, and that's me picking this one. So, interesting. What do I want to pick right now? Going down the list, let's talk about, you know what? I want to talk about Jalen Hurts. And we have all been fans of Jalen Hurts on this podcast to varying degrees. Jay was on him first. I really, really love Jalen Hurts, but it's not a question about his fantasy prowess. He's had 19 points at least every game. He is a fantasy stud. He has a high floor. He has a high ceiling. He's everything you want in your starting quarterback. The problem is I don't know if there's as big of a disconnect in the league right now of someone with their fantasy profile and their real NFL profile in terms of job security in particular. And the thing I worry about is we're coming off of 2 bad games with Jalen Hurts in a row. We know his scouting profile is that he is inconsistent as a thrower. That's how he's always been, and he's been more on the bad side of that consistency recently than at the beginning of the season, where he seemed to be a little bit around a corner. The numbers obviously are still like there, like fantasy-wise, but if you've watched these games, he's underthrowing deep balls, he's skipping balls to people out in the flat, he's sailing passes that should be easy. And the thing that really gets me, and I looked back at his throwing chart from all games, he's not throwing over the middle of the field. And I'm not sure what that is necessarily. I'm not sure if it's just he's not comfortable to make those throws with the touch and the timing that comes with, either finding the soft spot in the zone or punching it in there to a tight route. But it seems like guys are always open in the middle of the field, whether it's Ertz, Goddard, or Devontae Smith. But consistently, he's either rolling out and cutting the field in the third, or he's throwing the ball outside the numbers to begin with. So I'm not sure if that's a play calling thing. I'm not sure if that's a play calling thing based on his ability to make throws or what's happening there, but it's of a concern for his dynasty value for me. I still think he is a rock star for the rest of the season, and I would hope next season as well he'd get another year, given the weaker than usual QB class, given kind of the lack of options that may be available to them to improve. But beyond that, I'm worried because the passing doesn't seem to be progressing yet.
Yeah, the worry is, does he keep the job long term? That's really and it is, like you said, it's such an imbalance between fantasy production, which is gold, versus can this guy quarterback an NFL team, which he's only started 10 games. So it's still early. You want to see leaps, and this year his completion percentage is essentially gone down almost every week. There was some fluctuation, but 46% this week. Last week, and it was on prime time, so we all saw him play last week, and it was rough, really rough. Like you said, when he rolls out, it gets tough. It's almost like he might have one option on that side of the field. You almost want to see all of the angles just to be like, when he rolls to the right, are there multiple options over there, or is it just like,
well,
I
mean, no,
doesn't seem to be anything there, and then
because you can't scan the field, like you cut the field in half or in thirds doing
right,
that.
Exactly. And then RPO, he just seemed to be holding it every time, which seemed, it was tough against a tough run defense in Tampa Bay, but it almost seems like when they run RPO, it's like if he holds it every time, and defenses are just going to it's just, he's not going to get a ton there. And it was those touch throws. There were some windows he had, and just with a different quarterback hits those throws that has the touch to be able to lay it over, a linebacker and then drop it before the secondary for some completions at various spots of the field. He's not doing that consistently yet. So I share the same concerns. Love him short-term window fantasy. It's great. You wish you could had the faith of just like, if I get Joe Burrow on my team or Justin Herbert, or some of these guys, Lamar Jackson, I know I got long-term guys, Josh Allen.
Yeah, don't have to think about it for years.
You don't have that with Hurts. It's like, I love it, and I want to go with it for a championship with Hurts, but man, is he starting next year? Is he starting the year after? And like, you almost have to treat him like a Kirk Cousins or someone a little bit older who might have a short window as well, or Tom Brady even, like where you've got a good guy. You're like, I don't know what this window is, but I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where you have to value him.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to really look at and dispel that difference between we've talked about it before, the NFL success versus fantasy success. I mean, you can see performances that look good when you see the final number, like what demonstrates that better than Teddy Bridgewater this week. I don't know, he ended up with about 18 and a half points, but I mean, there's 4 turnovers in there, and it's a terrible performance with that. But you'd look at the numbers, that would be like, it's like 300 plus yards in there. The accuracy seemed sort of on, but when he was off, and that's not a performance that wins you long-term brownie points.
And yeah, it just say you just could buy Hurts. It's just a gamble. I wouldn't say he's not starting 3 years from now.
Oh, no.
Emphasize that it's just a gamble. You're just not. It's not 100% sure. It's like it's probably more of a 50-50, maybe higher than that, but shot, because that team has to win. That, these quarterbacks have sometimes short leashes if they don't start to win, especially if they're only completing around 55% of their passes.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that with people with higher pedigrees as well. Obviously, the Josh Rosen situation, although this is not saying that Jalen Hurts has been anywhere near that bad, but even look at Tua Tagovailoa, who's just, there's been rumblings for the past year that he's could be replaced, and part of that came with the Deshaun Watson trade rumors, but other things were just like people get yanked, and he was the 5th overall pick. Jalen Hurts doesn't have that kind of investment in him, literally, in terms of money. Like a dollar spent, there's less of an investment in Jalen Hurts right now, so that leash is weird. And like, they also have Gardner Minshew on that roster too, so it's not like they don't have a capable starting quarterback. Yes, Penny agrees with me as she yips in the
Minshew.
Corner. Yeah, it's not Penny's big Minshew fan. Low ceiling, but it's not a guy where you're like, okay, if things go bad, we can see what we have in Gardner Minshew, who's shown a little bit of flashes before, and maybe that guy can be the bridge if Jalen Hurts really isn't executing an offense beyond
for a coaching
legs.
Staff that wants to last too. They got to think about.
Yeah, that's also this is
they
a new
win too. So
if they think that eventually, like, what are they 1 or 2? They've won 2 games, so they're 2 and 4 right now.
They've been in games too.
They've been in games, but if things keep going the wrong direction, or if they're looking at themselves being 2 and 8 4 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now, like it's tough to. And Hurts has these same type of performances where he's passing for under 200 yards, 115 this past weekend. It's not out of the realm of possibility that you could see something crazy like that happen. I don't think that's really the possibility. I'd be more concerned with like next year if they start off 1 and 4 with Jalen Hurts and it's just more of the same, that they're like, okay, let's raise the ceiling here, raise the floor here a little bit and go with a game manager type who can execute kind of like, even if you look like, it seems like this is the problem. It seems like Jalen Hurts can't do those like safety blanket type throws that have been the staple of young quarterbacks. Like look at Mac Jones, 3-step drop, gets the ball out, 3-step drop, gets the ball out. And granted, it's different because Jalen Hurts has the mobility, but the ability just to hit these quick crossing patterns, these slants, these things like that, it doesn't seem like those are in the repertoire right now of Jalen Hurts. And also, I just want to say, I mean, like, we don't know what's going on inside that locker room. This may truly be a coaching issue. Like, that offensive system might just be a really bad passing game design. That's a possibility. But it concerns me when I see missed throws, like balls at people's feet, like Cam Newton-esque throwing from last year. But we should move on to our next category. Andrew, let's go to you at the 103.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Jonathan Taylor, who since about week 4 has just been continuing to pour it on and be just one of those running back superstars. He's currently running back 5, even after having a couple weak games in week 2 and 3, but overall he's averaging roughly 15 touches a game. And right now he just seems to be heating up. This last week, his best week on the year, 14 for 145, 2 touchdowns, one of which was an 83-yard touchdown, which when there's a big play like that, I kind of like to also reduce that. Like, what if we pulled that out as an outlier? He'd still be 13 for 62, which is still good for over 4 yards per carry. So still very efficient besides that not exactly blowing up his stats to like that area where you could punch holes in it otherwise.
But don't these big plays seem like not they're not really outliers for him though, because he just seems like he could break
3
one
games in a row
at any point.
Well, that's the thing. Whether you get a player like him or a player like Henry, Chubb, some of these guys that can just break. We know that Jonathan Taylor has that speed. He was a 4.39 combine guy in the 40. He's got that breakaway speed where if he busts through a hole, he's gone. You're not catching him. And there's other players that can do that. That's a skill that we know he has. So I agree. It shouldn't be taken as an outlier, but I kind of like to look at the performance otherwise, just to know that it wasn't one thing. And that if we didn't have that, his game would be completely lost. You'd have something like the 1 touchdown and then 60 yards. You'd still have like a respectable week. But yeah, no, I just love it because I think we agree that right now Derrick Henry's the best asset running back wise in fantasy and possibly dynasty too, because who are we to say it's going to stop? But Jonathan Taylor's 22 years old right now, still super young and already performing as I think I predict him as a top 3 back. He's top 5 right now and kind of in a pack of guys, but I like him to continue and I like him to be a strong performer for years. So I'm still going to have him as a top 3 back in my dynasty rankings because I feel like he's just got years ahead of him and he's right in the conversation with those other guys.
Yeah, I think because of the age that he's at and the significant amount of years that he has over our next guys like Dalvin, CMC, although I think we'll get to CMC in a little bit. Derrick Henry has mentioned, Alvin Kamara. He's pretty much like I feel like in Dynasty, him being the RB1 is probably the best choice just because of those years, you know what I mean? And the production masses. Like, I feel like, I mean, unless you are
Swift and Henry.
It's really hard. It's really hard for me to want to give the number 1 spot to someone unless they actually performed as the top. I mean, Derrick Henry's just so far and away. It'd be so difficult for me, at least the way I do my rankings, to put Jonathan Taylor over him unless Taylor like catches up to him or is close enough that all things are sort of equal.
No, I mean I get that, but I just think like the years are so much that let's say I feel like he is in the same tier as Derrick Henry in a startup and the choice then becomes, do we want Derrick Henry? We know this guy is the best running back in the league right now, but has the years, or Jonathan Taylor, who is putting up top 5 numbers.
Yeah, which that's a choice you can make.
At 22.
Like, I want to go younger. That's the way I'm building. That's the way I plan on building my team, and that's perfectly fine. But pure rankings, I get in whatever, talking theory, things are never going to play out in a draft. You're going to shift. Or even in trades, there might just be something that suits your team better. So value's always kind of fluid, but in like a pure value for value's sake type of rankings, I think I'd still have him number 2 to Derrick Henry.
Yeah, you're trying to have your cake and eat it. I want the 22-year-old that I'm hoping their lines converge and Taylor goes ahead of Henry. Like right now, Henry's gap on everybody else is so huge right now that it's not even funny, but you're hoping that Taylor and him's, cross and Taylor can,
just easy, right? Because if Taylor caught up to him, like, well, of course he's younger and he's performing the same.
Right, exactly. One of the favorite things I saw about Taylor this past week, too, just in terms of usage, and I think we've all been on Twitter or at least in chats where you're like, why don't they play Taylor more? Like, he should probably have more carries. Like, honestly, get this guy 20 carries a game.
Probably. We could bump him up to at least like average 18.
Yeah, I mean, get the guy more touches. But encouraging that he got to 65% snap share at least this week. So he'd been hovering around 50 and occasionally under. So it's like, I want to see him on the field as much as possible. Yes, these guys
because that's what Derrick Henry has, is that this
that
team
guy
runs through him.
Everything goes
stranglehold on the job. Yeah.
So Taylor, you want to see him just usage wise needs to bump up to another level to just be like, sure, you're not going to have for under 50% snap share week where he gets 8 carries. Like that just should never happen. But let's see that. I'm hoping that Indy starts to. We should never see that Indy play Jonathan Taylor, get him the ball.
It's just, you see what he can do. You put the high draft capital into him. What was he, a third in the second round there?
Yeah.
Haven't heard from the dog in a while.
She's fine. I literally have her toy right now, and I'm like playing with her on the side because she just keeps barking at me to play.
Whatever
Just
you
let her
gotta
outside, Josh. Just put her out in the city. Just
Yeah, no, I'm not. There's no
do.
outside.
You have a fire escape?
No,
Just
no, I
roll
don't,
around.
You go figure out. Oh, yeah. Anyways, in conclusion, Jonathan Taylor, he's pretty good. Let's move on to our next storyline. Jay at the 104.
At the 104, let's see. I want to look at this Seattle run game. Let's look at that. Running back is a disaster, and this could be a theme if running backs brought up really in any other topic here, because it's just injuries all over the place. I could have brought up probably like 5 different rushing injuries that happened that we will probably get to later on. But Seattle's an interesting one because you have Chris Carson, who now has an IR stint, neck injury. So he's going to miss at least, I believe, 2 more games. I believe they put him on IR and he missed a game, so he has to miss 2 more with a tricky neck injury. Alex Collins comes in, looks pretty good. Not bad. Alex Collins comes in, plays 60% of the snaps this past week, gets almost all of the running back carries, basically. I mean, they're giving him basically, even when Carson was there the week before, got a lot of play, got a touchdown this past week, had 35 out of 36 carries, 46 carries over the last 2 weeks, and then 65% snap share combined. So it's just like, it's the Alex Collins show right now, but then he gets banged up at the end of that game. So Alex Collins is iffy for this week. And guess whose name comes back into the picture here? Rashad Penny, coming off IR. One more time, Rashad Penny in the mix for playing time this week. And he's being picked up in leagues. Back from IR. They're playing the Saints next, I believe that's Monday Night Football. So I was looking at this. You have to find value somewhere at running back. We're all probably scrambling in leagues. In Dynasty, you're looking to make trades for running backs to fill bye weeks and things like that. And I was looking at Alex Collins during that game. I'm like, he's the perfect contender buy. Fill in 2 weeks, get snap share. I mean, not bad, cheap, not going to cost you that much. The future, I mean, who's holding on to Alex Collins? Then he gets banged up, and you're like, what do I do? Am I going for, to the Rashad Penny well again here? Am I going to go try to buy him? Do you buy Chris Carson, hoping in a couple weeks that guy comes back? I don't like neck injuries, personally. Don't like to.
No, I think I'm not afraid to say it. Don't like neck injuries.
Don't like that.
So, I mean, Peyton came back from one, but
so my question here is like a fun thing. Who do you buy? If you had to buy one of these guys, are you buying Alex Collins, Rashad Penny, or Chris Carson out of these 3 guys?
Oh, God. Oh, that is a Sophie's choice. That is rough. I want to say Alex Collins.
Because what's the latest report on the injury?
It's day to day. It's like
I don't even know what it was. It was just like he got hit a lot. He was just like beat up. His is not long term, but it's weird because you might have Carson coming back. If Penny starts and plays well, like, do you just end up with this Baltimore committee where like everybody's playing? Like, I don't know. I think it's Collins too. I would answer that. I think that's the cheapest buy and actually one that might at least help you for a couple weeks. But Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's Collins too. Knowing that he's more day to day, with Carson having gone on the IR, I know that's not the worst thing. It's not what it meant years ago, because for him, it's really, or for all players, it's that minimum of 3 weeks. So he could be back sooner than we think he is. But
Does
I
Mike
think
mean the dog or?
That's what I was gonna say. I was like, and when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's a cute joke about my dog. But then I'm like, oh wait, Rashad Penny. Okay.
Mike's just all dog talk tonight. It's like, I don't want to hear anything about these fantasy players. Just tell me about Penny. Penny the dog.
That's true.
You
She's
can get her
Boston
for
Terrier. She's 10 months old.
A late
But-
fourth, you can get the dog.
Yeah.
Penny's three first and nothing less for Penny.
Yeah, you fall in love
The
with your
dog
players
Penny,
too
not
much.
Rashad Penny.
You're too in love with your pets. But yeah, no, Collins seems to be the guy that when Carson's out, they rely on him. He's sort of filling in the way Carlos Hyde would have last year and before. They seem to trust him, and I'm not worried about people like DJ Dallas, who seems to serve only as that pass-catching third down guy. I mean, he was really involved in the latter half, the end of that game there, getting a bunch of targets, but that's just because that's the role he serves. He also coughed the ball up like twice, got it back. It seems to not be the greatest on ball security from what I could see in that really short window. And then same thing with Travis Homer. And yeah, I guess on that roster, the only other guy would be a Rashad Penny, but when has he stayed healthy? So
Never. That's it.
Yeah, it hasn't been.
that's
since
state
then.
of affairs when we're like Alex Collins is the guy. Like this was
Penny and
almost
Collins
a joke
would
before.
cost about the same. I mean, it'd be negligible, the difference. I guess Penny's like, I don't know. People still hold on to him. Some people really like,
Yeah, he
if you
might
drafted
still
him
be
years
someone.
ago, it's
Yeah.
like people hold on. Like,
Right,
Yeah.
so there are leagues that have drafted since 2018 and don't have that sort of like, I used a first round pick on Penny. Like, you
I
can
did.
probably get it.
Hands up. I used the first.
Yeah,
That guy.
Put your hands up if you've drafted.
In a rookie draft, everybody did because that's where he went.
That's
Nope, I
true.
took-
Have
I
you?
took
You've
my
gotten
guy,
more
Tony.
value. You've gotten more value. Yeah, that was a weird class. Who else was a running back in that
Tony
class?
Michelle.
So Stoney, Ronald Jones,
Carryon Johnson.
Yeah, there's
Saquon,
a lot
obviously.
of landmines all over the place in that one.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
basically
I-
Derek. Oh yeah,
Nick
Darius
Chubb was the
Geis.
only one out of that's
Chubb. Yeah, that was good.
I know we can say Saquon because
Well,
it's
yeah.
Chubb and Saquon.
yeah, Chubb and Saquon.
That's true. We'll have to go back to our when we redrafted the leagues before.
That's a good
This is a good comment. I think the dog is
More
just angry you're
dog
talking
comments,
about the other Penny. That's funny. I love it.
I think she is.
Penny, Penelope, where are you? Get back here. Anyways, let's move on to our next category. And you had a question, Jay, there about who to buy out of Rashad Penny, Alex Collins, and Chris Carson. The answer is Leonard Fournette because he has been
Regular
terrific
season
the
Lenny?
last regular season Lenny. Good old Uncle Lenny. He's been terrific. Where's my stats here and my notes on him? He has. Let's see. I cannot find them in my notes. This is great content, Josh. Regular season Lenny is currently RB11 on the season in PPR. He has 3 straight games with over 20 fantasy points. And here are 3 random numbers for you. 26, 16, and 28. That's his touches the last 3 weeks, respectively. 26 and 28 touches for Leonard Fournette in week 4 and week 6. He's getting a high snap share. Ronald Jones is an afterthought. Apparently, Brady trusts him. It's a good offense, and he's producing. I don't know where this came from, but if you have Leonard Fournette, you're in a nice place with a guy that either you had left for dead, acquired on the cheap, or, I don't know, somehow had him on your roster. And I still think people haven't quite caught up to how good Leonard Fournette has been this year. And I think, like, if you're going to buy Leonard Fournette, do it right now because he's going to be the cheapest RB1 you can get.
I'd say do it 4 weeks ago. That's always
Even
the
cheaper.
answer.
Yeah.
You're like, can I sneak in an offer after he put up 2 touchdowns?
Yeah, do you think a first gets that done in Dynasty?
I think you start with the first, and if it's like presumably a late first.
Could start with the second, and then which is probably a bad offer, but then bump it to a first. Yeah, I think you probably have to pay a first, but man, he is so involved. Ronald Jones's usage has gone down
Uh-huh.
since the beginning of the year. Yeah, and they throw to him, which I think is wild because I don't even know if he's that good at it, but he can catch it and then
he's better than Ronald Jones at it, and that's all that matters. And Gio's banged up.
Those tiny
hands. Little tiny hands.
Yeah, I mean he's at 70% snap share pretty much the last 3 weeks. I mean, Fournette, it's gone up as the year's gone on. So. And that offense is great. So if you're the main running back on a good offense, that's the recipe.
I feel like Brady likes his guys, and like Lenny must be his guy. So
clearly,
it is certainly not Keyshawn Vaughn, who has, I believe, been a healthy scratch most weeks. 3rd round pick Keyshawn Vaughn, 2nd round pick Ronald Jones. But you know what? The 104, Mr. Leonard Fournette. That's the guy who gets the job done.
I still love knowing that Keyshawn Vaughn went at the 104 in a rookie draft I was in. That's still just...
It was a super flex draft too, wasn't it?
It was. It still gives me so much joy to think of that.
Oh my God.
Over Herbert and Tua, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. That's awful. That
was a draft where in completely bragging that I got Justin Herbert at the 203.
We're moving on. Andrew, what's your next topic?
All right. Well, you know how much we love tight ends. So I'm going to talk about Zach Ertz being traded to Arizona, which is sort of interesting because I remember we heard there were sort of trade rumblings of Zach Ertz in the preseason, but it never really came to anything. And that sort of seemed like the optimal thing for someone like him and Goddard being there in the Philadelphia offense. And maybe if you were unsure about where things were going to go with Hurts, you didn't know if 2 tight ends were going to feast in that offense. Maybe they cannibalize each other. But actually, until this point, Zach Ertz had been out targeting Dallas Goedert. I know he missed the last game, but he's got him 31 targets to 19, which is, he was actually getting some usage. So he's still alive over there. And you got to think that him going to his own team, a team that he has more targets than all of the tight ends on Arizona. I think all the tight ends on Arizona combined for about 21 targets. So I don't know if that's because that team just doesn't have any good tight ends or because that's just not in the game plan for that offense. And I don't know if Zach Ertz going there changes it, but part of me has to think that it's a confirmation bias of, well, they traded for him, so maybe they want to use him and get that more involved. But that offense is definitely throwing it. There's definitely multiple receivers benefiting from Kyler Murray right now. So I kind of like that, getting in a more competitive team that's more consistently producing. We'll see how much they like to throw to the tight end, but I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about him sort of getting his own chance in a place where there's no other tight end that's really going to challenge him.
Yeah, they lost Max XX Williams, who was sneaky good for them. He wasn't fantasy relevant,
but he had 17 of those 21 targets, so he was the guy if there was a guy.
And he was a good blocker. He was a good NFL tight end and was doing a lot for them in a lot of different facets. So I think getting Zach Ertz fills that void, and obviously is a better pass catcher than Max Williams, who was not bad in any respects in that means. But you got to think that this is just another weapon for Kyler Murray to play with. The problem being there's already DeAndre Hopkins, who only has a 20% target share, by the way, which is something that we haven't, he's still been good, but that's kind of alarming in for a little bit.
It's a little
spread out there.
It's spread out there. Rondale Moore's been good. Christian Kirk has had his games. AJ Green has had his games. And now you add Zach Ertz to the mix there. So I don't know if this is necessarily I love that offense as a whole. Love Kyler Murray as a top 5 play each and every week. I don't know if any of these guys are going to enter anything more than, wide receiver 2 conversation, wide receiver 3 type, still good plays week in and week out, but it's so spread out. And then for tight end, it's not hard to get into the top 12. And I think Zach Ertz probably already was a borderline starter for somewhere. Yeah, I mean, that probably
per game, but it wouldn't take a lot for him to jump into.
Yeah, exactly. Like, does he end up being like a better play, especially as we head into bye weeks, week in and week out? Yeah, sure. But does he end up entering a conversation of the, the top 5 or 6 who seem to be like with the Dalton Schultz, the Kyle Pitts, the TJ Hawkinson, that sort of tier? Before you get to the Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce tier, which seems like the top 2 guys this year. No, probably not, unless something crazy happens. That would, and if that does happen, it means that's coming out of somebody else's mouth. So you're losing AJ Green, you're losing. Yeah, I'd be more interested in Zach Ertz if there's some like attrition in that wide receiver core. If AJ Green's not is a friend of the injured reserve, like he's been there quite a bit the last few years. If AJ Green goes down, then maybe I think a little bit more about him. But other than that, he's kind of just another one of these tight ends who I think is playable, but not necessarily an overwhelming value.
Yeah, and it's the clear 5th option, that 11% target share. All the other Moore, Green, Kirk, and Hopkins are all higher. So it's a clear 5th option. Does Ertz present a better option where they kind of scheme that more? I don't know. Maybe. He's certainly better than Max Williams, but we'll have to see. I think he's a tight end you could play, though, because that's the way tight end. If you don't have one of those guys you mentioned, then you're probably playing Zach Ertz.
Yeah, probably.
Roster,
he got me through a bye week this past week in one of the leagues. So
yeah, and he was playable anyways because of Goddard being out, and so I think he's going to be in the mix, especially during bye weeks.
Yeah, so congratulations, you got yourself a tight end. Jay, let's go to the 107.
107. Let's jump over to more running back injuries. The Browns, or just injuries in general. We could talk about all. How about we talk about all their injuries?
Let's lump it in. Let's lump in the running back.
We don't have enough time to talk about all of them.
Baker, dislocated shoulder.
And Jay, please, before you do this, please run through all the running back injuries to the tune of "We Didn't Start the Fire" by Billy Joel.
Sure, yeah. Oh, I was gonna just do Browns injuries because I think there's a lot of those, anyways.
That's true. Yeah. Just Browns injury. I thought you meant running back injuries.
That team, just because it's multiple running backs and then also multiple other players on their team. So Baker has dislocated his shoulder twice, I believe, or basically the other shoulder, the left one, but he wants to play through it. So that's not great. Chubb and Hunt both hurt, both out Thursday. So Hunt in this game playing for Chubb, who's already out for last Sunday's game. He has a calf injury as well. Hunt's does not sound good. That sounds like 3 to
6. I've seen
3 to 6 range.
Yeah, Schefter's report, I think.
Calf injuries, the new ACL this year? I don't know. Everybody seems to.
There's been a lot of calf injuries. Although when the Kareem Hunt thing happened and you grab the back of his calf, this is why it's scary. You immediately go to Achilles. That's the thing that's scary. And it's obviously that. Well, I mean, you've seen it before. Like, if you saw like the Mohammed Ibrahim from college, that one where you saw it rumble in the calf. You saw, I don't know if anyone, Cam Akers, I believe, grabbed his his calf was where you notice things like that. Kevin Durant for a basketball thing, like you saw him grab his calf after injuring his Achilles. So not as bad as it could be, but that's the problem with calf injuries.
Pushing you towards almost playoffs in fantasy. So not great there if he lasts 6 weeks and then at that point, it's not great for a guy that was a real stud for fantasy this year. Hunt was crushing it and was going to have a couple good weeks here with Chubb out. And also Beckham banged up in that game. He's questionable going forward. Injury still there. Landry hasn't come off IR yet. So this is a team that is basically in shambles in terms of all of these injuries. But now when you're looking to fill in spots this year and survive, and this goes for redraft or dynasty, because if you're trying to win this year, you need to find ways to win these weeks. If you're 3-3, 4-2, these weeks matter because you want to get a bye. You want to have as many wins as possible, obviously. So we're looking at who do you play here? So you're looking at the depth chart for running back, Dearness Johnson. We all remember blowing fab on him last year, probably. And then you also have Demetric Felton, wide receiver, running back Demetric Felton, who is also in the mix, who's flashed this year, but he's flashing more from he gets a screen pass and then he does something with it.
I do want to say of the two,
more of a passing option.
of the two guys, that's the guy you want to buy though in Dynasty, because like if they are out of receiving options, out of running options,
True.
even if he's just racking up short passes, if he's Cordarrelle Patterson,
Right.
if he's not even so much that, like if he puts up a line that's like 6-4-40, and then adds like 8 carries for 20 something yards, that's a passable week in bye weeks. You get that 10 to 12 points. Like that's
gonna have to score a touchdown because like he's going to play more. I guarantee you, Dearness Johnson's first and second down guy.
He's gonna get the bulk of the carries.
Felton's the passing down guy, although Johnson could be mixed in there too. But he's going to be the guy who catches more. But he's only going to play probably like his max snap share this year is 20% last week. So I don't know if you're seeing Demetric Felton out there for 70% of the snaps. It's probably gonna be like 30, like Cordarrelle Patterson this year, 30%. It'll just be like, what does he do with his touches? I think your point's right though. He probably, for a rookie too, is a guy to like, you don't even know what he is long term because he is hard to define. So at least we know Dearness Johnson is like however long Chubb's out, which might not be that long. That's the only period of time where he's probably relevant at all. So, but you got to survive these weeks. So he's probably a waiver wire pickup, or maybe he's lingering on a roster in Dynasty. He would be I would assume he'd be cheap to get, but I don't know if I would even do that. I don't think I would spend because I don't know if I see any long-term viability in Dearness Johnson. Felton, to your point, probably if you bought that, at least you would have a mystery box going forward where maybe you get a little something if you have to play him. And then maybe there's something forward. And then at the receiver side, Donovan Peoples-Jones, the Peoples-Jones, stepping up big, like catching Hail Marys, long plays.
What's up?
Still, that's what he does. It's going to be like a 3 for 80, 4 for 100, but man, looking good there. And there's not a lot of receiving options until Landry or Beckham come back. So, not a bad guy to play if you have
Peoples-Jones is such an interesting prospect because, I mean, we obviously love him because, like, he's a freak of an athlete, like, jumps so high, and he's, like, big and fast and, like, does all the things well. Not a lot of production in college out of Michigan, like, just not a lot of receptions in that offense. It's 5-star recruit coming out of high school, like, was highly recruited, has a pedigree. And this is a team, and this is just more of a point. We're looping in the whole Browns here. I'm kind of in on Donovan Peoples-Jones as like a pretty high-quality stash because Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. may not be on that team 2 years from now. And that team, like, so Donovan Peoples-Jones, if he continues to flash, may find himself in a position where he has a pretty decent snap share and these kind of games become more consistent. That's still a long shot, but I think it's worth a stash for a team that hasn't really spent a lot of draft capital on wide receivers recently. I mean, they spent a second on Schwartz, but he's really more of a special teams player, burner that just kind of runs straight.
They put more into the defense for the draft.
Yeah, exactly. And if they're going to be a
6-rounder, I think.
And if they're going to be a run-first team, Jones was a 6th-round pick. If they're going to be a run-first team, then they may not want to be putting that much in. And so there may be a role for Donovan Peoples-Jones that's more consistent down the road because I think he's talented. I think he's a talented guy. I just don't know if the volume's ever going to be there to be like a super, like more than a wide receiver 3. But beyond right now, he's just kind of a boomer bust streaming option.
Right. Definitely boomer bust for sure.
Let's move on to our next storyline, which is going back to me. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Sam Darnold, who had another rough game this week. So he was basically like, I think it was at a point where he was like 5 for 17 in the game. And then it got better in the fourth quarter. Penny agrees with me. Like, he was not good. And that's coming off of the game against the Eagles where he was just bad. He finished 17 of 41 for 207, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and a lost fumble. He did have a nice 11-play, 96-yard touchdown drive to finish the fourth quarter and tie the game up against the Vikings. So it's like you see that and you're encouraged, but like basically it was 7 straight quarters of absolute garbage from him. and then a nice end of the fourth quarter that ended up coming up short as they lost in overtime in that game. So I don't really know what to make of Sam Darnold at this point, although I'm more worried now than I was last week. And that kind of aberration of this resurgent quarterback, I just don't know if that's the case anymore. And if this continues along this trajectory, he's not going to be the quarterback in Carolina next year. And to that point, I will have basically won my argument against Tommy Tipple from the summer.
Lost
not to say.
And now it's starting to.
I lost it and it's coming back,
does.
baby.
It comes back around. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was going to take an L on that.
Yeah, through weeks 1 through 3, 2 turnovers. And now weeks 4 to 6, 7. Big jump. Like just completely somewhere in the Dallas game, things started to, and then the last 2 weeks, obviously, just not consistent at all. I mean, losing his job, that would get into their investment in him. I don't know. I mean, he was never, I guess, an option. They brought him in, but how long is the leash? That's always the question. We don't know, but he's in the realm of quarterbacks where if their play regresses, that could be it. He does not have an investment that is going to be like, no, we need to see more. It'll be a 4-year sample size at that point. We got to see more, obviously. We saw it's a little in the weeks fantasy wise, he was good up until the last 2. He was fine for 4 throughout that, but the turnovers kind of changed in the Dallas game. We got to see more, obviously, but yeah, if you continue where you're turning the ball over, that's your best bet. Ask Jameis Winston how it goes. You don't keep your quarterback job if you can't keep the ball. If you're
that's the tough part. The turnovers are bad, and I think this is a roster that they think is ready to compete. Like I feel like they think that this team is good. The defense is really good. They've got offensive weapons. They need to improve that offensive line a little bit more, but they haven't been awful this year. And I know CMC's out, but how much Sam Darnold shouldn't be so totally reliant on his offensive ability based on just CMC on one player. He should be able to operate an offense without CMC. It helps. It's great to have maybe the best running back in the game, all around running back with the pass catching ability for the overall ceiling, but he's looked terrible the past 2 weeks.
And
just awful.
And how bolstered were some of his numbers earlier on by that slew of rushing touchdowns? The
5 rushing touchdowns, yeah, a ton.
Pretty wild looking at those 2 games with you can't take them away. That's what he did, but it just if you're almost looking just at fantasy points and maybe ignoring some of those blunders and interceptions, fumbles, all of that, it seems like the rushing touchdowns sort of saved his fantasy weeks, whereas maybe some of those games weren't that great if you were to take the whole thing in.
He at least got to 300 yards passing. I mean, last 2 under 60% passing in both, including 41% this past week. And his highest, he had 177 passing and 207 in yards. I mean, that's not, those are low yardage outputs, and obviously the completion percentage not great. So whereas he was, kind of prolific the first 3 weeks in 300-yard games, and it's. So let's see what the next couple weeks bring, but he's certainly on watch for wait, what's going on here? Let's
play. I want to play for a rest of the season though, because he started off super high. I think he was quarterback 5. He's now
11.
No, he's farther back than that. I think he's down to 15, 16, somewhere around there, just from these past few weeks.
I don't know. I got the numbers up in front of me. He's at.
Yeah, he's 11 total points. Yep.
Oh, he's 11 in total points. Oh, sorry. I was looking at.
Oh, you.
I was looking at average points per game.
13 in average.
13 in average. So he's falling off a pretty good amount there. And what quarterback would you rather have for the rest of the season? Would you rather have Sam Darnold or Matt Ryan?
Ooh, that's close.
I'm gonna say Ryan because I feel like I'll take the veteran, and if we're just looking at this season, of course we're just looking at this season, but he started off real slow. I don't know what was going on with that Atlanta offense. Like there was a lot of things going on, but it feels like before their bye week, they were starting to kind of get that figured out. And once Ridley's back in that offense with them, and we got Pitts also starting to break out. And if Cordarrelle continues, all of a sudden this is that Atlanta offense like banging on all cylinders. And yeah, I'll take the veteran there. I'll go
decent schedule too. I take Ryan too. Close.
Yeah, no schedule helps obviously.
For the rest of the season, Darnold or Trevor Lawrence?
Lawrence.
Yeah, Lawrence just has that wow factor. We've talked about it already, but he's the guy who seems to look better and better every week.
I thought he's been great. That defense is also bad. So
they're always
gonna have to
trying to come back too.
Gonna have to chuck it.
And last name I'll throw out there, and I'll go back to the same division. Then Jameis Winston or Sam Darnold?
Darnold.
Yeah, I'll go Darnold.
Yeah, I think I agree with that as well. But I mean
Michael Thomas is coming back, but
yeah, but I mean, when? I don't know if he's even going to be back this.
It depends on which fantasy site you're looking at. MFL seems to. I can't remember which one. I think MFL has a projection for him coming back, and then
some say this week, some say never.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait until the injury reports come out and the designations for this week. Let's move on to our next storyline at the 109, Andrew.
Okay. I will just talk a little bit about CeeDee Lamb just balling out against our Patriots. You always hate to see someone have their best game of the season against your team, but if you're invested in CeeDee Lamb, that's what you want to see out of this guy, because he was just making it happen all over the field. It's like whether it was down the sidelines or like over the middle, this guy can make it happen everywhere. And he's just a slippery run. Like there's so many times where he can just sort of like non-contact juke some of these guys. Like I just love what I see from him and his ability to go up there and get it and to move and dive for extra yards. This guy, I think, is the total package. And yeah, whenever someone can put up 9 receptions for 149 yards, get a couple touchdowns in there, it's just, he's a monster. And being one of the younger players out there, obviously from a dynasty perspective, this is a guy that you're hoping you're going to have for years to come. So with Dak Prescott throwing to him, no less. I know we already sort of talked about a lot of mouths to feed over there, but I think he's going to be the overarching guy that wins out there regardless, because really the only time he didn't feast was 2 weeks ago when he had those 2 receptions. But besides that, like, he has been more than reliable, if not lights out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's a beast. It was nice to see him because he had been a little disappointing to this point this year. It had been spread out a lot more, but like, he's just so good. I don't have any other analysis other than that.
Yeah, my only thoughts is like I think he's firmly established like that top tier for me, which is always like 7 or 8 wide receivers, because it's sort of not that it's a flat tier, but it's like there's so many good guys at the top. I think he's firmly in that, kind of 7 guys that in a startup you're comfortable taking as your wide receiver 1, where you've got a guy who's going to be rock solid for you for years to come. I think CeeDee Lamb is totally fine in that top tier.
Let's move on to the 110, Jay.
All right. A couple different storylines I want to get to. We talked about CMC a little bit. I just want to ask the question now. We know CMC, it seems like he re-aggravated the hamstring. And what does Penny want? Let's ask Penny what she wants to talk about.
Penny wants to run back and forth across the entirety of my apartment as she's been doing for the last 5 minutes.
Bark once for buy, bark twice for sell.
That's true. I do want to say you said a little bit Penny like Desmond from Lost. That is where I got the name. Yeah. I did go with Penelope.
Not Penny's boat.
Penny! Penny brother. Anyway, sorry.
I love you.
CMC.
Penny brother, I love you.
So to recap around Jay, Christian McCaffrey out again, at least 3 more weeks on IR with the hamstring injury. He has only played 5 full games now, which will be for a season and a half. Will be the total.
Correct. So he's a little bit of a dilemma in particularly in Dynasty. So the first part is not that we have to get to both, but a contender. A little bit. Is he a buy, or could he even be a sell? Like, you think about it, it's like if you're a contender and you need to win in the short term, you're 3-3. You're in a little bit of a precarious situation. When you think you're a contender and you have CMC, is he a sell? But could he also be a buy where you're a contender and you're sitting back 6-0, 5-1? Would you buy him? Like, he's a little bit of false categories.
I think that's the kind of the rub there is I think if you're sitting there at like 6-0 with CMC on your roster or CMC not on your roster, yeah, go ahead and buy him. If you need to like give up a significant asset to get him that you think can replace him, and you have that depth, Penny, no more. I think, yeah, why not roll the dice? If like you're in a good win total, but you feel like you need that extra piece to put you over the edge, but you have the depth to survive until he's back, then I think go for it. She falls down the puppy stairs. I'm so sorry. This is ridiculous. However, if you're 3-3 with CMC sitting on your roster and you think you can compete and you can trade him for, I don't know, like if you can trade him for, like what kind of asset would you be looking for back? You'd obviously need to replace a running back to some extent, someone who can play now for you. I think you got to do that.
Coming up with the trade, but it's like you're almost in a situation where it's like
in 3 weeks you could end up sitting there being 4-6 and being out of it, or 4 and like you're 3-3. You go 1-2 for the next few games, and you're kind of sitting there looking outside in on the playoffs. And what do you do then? And then maybe CMC doesn't come back in 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's not guaranteed.
You don't have the luxury there.
Things are tricky. It's already went from 3. He's practicing after 1, and then he misses it, and he goes on IR after 3. So it's like,
yeah,
so like, I mean, I don't know how much he's guaranteed for you later. The flip side of that, maybe Andrew, I'll throw this to you. If you're a rebuild team, obviously not long-term rebuild, would you buy CMC?
No.
Someone's trying to move on, or are you just like, nah, I don't want that. I will look elsewhere for guys to rebuild around.
No, I mean, as a rebuild team, I don't mind the idea of bringing in an injured player like a J.K. Dobbins or someone like that, where there's still sort of years ahead of them. We've sort of watched, and we've talked about it before, these injuries start creeping up on CMC starting last year. That was the first year where the cracks started to show and then, this year we came in clean hoping that it would be better, but I can't help but think that the workload that team asks of him is just a bit too much at this point. And I guess that you're going to look at either they have to put him on a snap count, which sort of limits the upside that I would want from him anyway, and I don't want to pay the money he would command for a guy who's going to be put on a snap count like that, or he's going to blow up a few times for you and then get injured again. Maybe I'm just snake bitten at the idea of bringing him in, but I feel like once you start seeing those cracks and they don't seem to be fixing, and they don't seem to be going away, it's hard to want to invest in him, especially at the amount that you would still be putting in for him, even as a rebuild team trying to bring him in.
Yeah.
I feel like you want to bring in guys that you can get for like cheaper. And I still don't think CMC is going to be Yeah.
He's only 26, but like you probably might want to go younger. I think my favorite spot there is the contender buy. You know, like
I
if you're
like the contender buy. I thought that was a good premise that if you're like 6
I mean, that's
it's
a swing for the fence. Yeah.
and you can withstand the.
Yeah, you can withstand the weeks. He comes in for the playoffs for you. Yeah, I mean that's like a home run. Like it's
I think
just that's the
yeah.
sweet spot. I think
That's the ideal buy situation. Otherwise, I hope you can kind of sell him on. And I don't know what your contender sells would be for him. I don't know if maybe you could pull in someone like a
whether you can get
Swift or
enough,
something
yeah.
like or can you buy someone else who's not quite as injured? Maybe try to buy like a Nick Chubb or something like that.
Your hope is you could go cross position. Maybe you got James Robinson and Cordarrelle you know, like you got like a patchwork running back core, and you could go cross position and get, you know, I don't know.
Get like a high quality, but like maybe it's like a Leonard Fournette, and then it's is like the add-on on top of
Stephon
like
Diggs,
like Stephon Diggs and Leonard Fournette.
Like,
yeah,
I was gonna say, would you trade him for like a Joe Mixon package? I know we're not big fans of him.
I know, just on principle.
God, I just think Joe Mixon. I think like Joe Mixon would command too much of a price relative. Like I'd much rather have Leonard Fournette for the rest of the year than Joe Mixon at the price. I know we don't value Joe Mixon, but I don't think someone who owns Joe Mixon is giving him away for anywhere near the price of what you could get for a Leonard Fournette, just to go to that example as it is, even though I think like all things considered.
Yeah. I mean, that's saying that you're just saying that Lenny's cheaper than Mixon, which
Exactly. I'm just saying in this package, if you wanted to be like CMC for Joe Mixon plus, Joe Mixon's the main part of that point. I think it's ideal to find something where it'd be like, I'll trade CMC for Darren Waller in a tight end premium league plus a cheaper running back who can still who's win now, like short term window, like obviously, like I said, a Leonard Fournette. I just don't think Joe Mixon fits that bill.
Yeah, no, that seems.
And why buy a running back really when they're all going to get hurt anyways? You know.
Yeah, it's true. You can pick up Alex Collins and Demetric Felton.
Khalil Herbert.
This is why zero RB is the way to go.
It might be. I don't know.
CMC straight up for Cordarrelle Patterson. Is that something that's on the table? We can do that. Let's move on to our next, the 111, and that's back to me. And I do since we're kind of still on this, we talked a little bit about buy and sells right now. I just want to throw this out there right now. Any other buys or sells that you have in Dynasty for this year?
Sell CEH. that's my
5 weeks in a row bagging CEH. Just killing him. Unbelievable.
Oh my God! Yeah,
you would sell him. You would right now. You would. I do think Darrell Williams. Although I just bought Darrell Williams because I'm desperate in spots, but I would sell him in a second. Like if you have Darrell Williams, sell that guy immediately. He's a great sell. Just take what you can get because I don't.
Oh yeah.
And I bought him. And this is a guy who bought him. Like I mean, I think I can play him for a couple of weeks.
Some of those mid-range guys might be good, like the McKissicks and stuff.
Yeah, they're all great sells. It's perfect for like the rebuild team who fell into those. Like you happen to have them on your team.
Oh yeah,
like perfect sells. Like just get rid of those guys. Don't need them. Like they're not long-term guys. I mean, Darrell Williams, fine story or anything. I watched him play. That is not a long-term guy. But he, found a way into the end zone, and that gets you fantasy points. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But my thought was a buy. And I'm not even a big Miles Sanders guys. Is he a buy low?
I think if you are
in that game, and he's still young, and they have a sweet schedule coming up against running backs. I think if you can get him for the right price, I think he's a nice one because there's even that long term you never know in terms of if he starts to get used, which is kind of half the problem.
Yeah. I think he's a good buy, especially I think he's a good buy if you're not a contender. Like if I'm a contender, I'm trying to buy a more sure asset right now. If I'm not a contender, I'm taking a flyer on Miles Sanders if you can get him.
I think maybe like in the mix there's like a buy of the mid contender, lower contender. I think Henderson, Robinson are like the surefire buys. Like I bought Robinson in the league for a first. I have no they're getting the volume. Darrell Henderson's getting all the volume there too. Pay a first for him, even maybe a tiny bit more. Long term, there are problems there. Guys are coming back. That's going to keep their price low, though. So go buy those guys because they're basically the workhorse for their team right now. Those are the surefire buys. Miles Sanders is a little sneaky, he might be a long-term play, but there's risk there. But he's interesting because it's like, I think we've reached a territory with him where it's like so low that it's like, I don't know, maybe it's time. It's going to turn the corner the other way.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's a risky buy
too, because like that team's offense, like I'm not saying that he looked good the other night when they ran him. That could have just been because Tampa Bay was like, "Oh my God, you ran the ball!" Like I can't believe you did that. But they need to, like they
need to do that.
Team needs to balance their offense better. They can't put everything on Hurts, but
yeah. Just to circle out some more buys especially for non-contender teams. I think this is the time of year where you can do kind of like the injured player flips for guys that like teams that are competing that have like a Russell Wilson go down and you have a healthy quarterback that you can flip for that and get a bit of a compete tax. I think this is the time of year when you're starting to be able to do that. So I think if you're a non-compete team, Russell Wilson's a great buy. If you have a guy I'm trying to think of who would be in there. Ryan Tannehill, if he had maybe a little lower than that, a Derek Carr, something like that you can maybe upgrade at quarterback. That's probably a little low in terms of those sort of quarterbacks. If you have Jalen Hurts is a great example. If someone has Russell Wilson, you have Jalen Hurts. I'd flip Jalen Hurts for Russell Wilson to a compete team. That's the sort of deal that I would try to make to get a more stable asset, maybe get a second round pick on top of Russell for a compete tax. That's the sort of thing I'd be looking to do.
Yeah, I think that might drop to the point where the compete tax is made up by the long-term value between, like, I feel like you'd only get a compete tax on top of Russell if you were trading for a guy that was more like even with him.
Yeah, I think you're probably
guess
right.
that Jalen Hurts, if you're looking at fantasy points alone, they might have been performing about equal, but I have to think that someone might be hesitant to give anything on top. They might do like a pure swap of like someone like Hurts for Wilson.
Yeah. I mean, there's other players like in that range. I think like Hurts is the one guy where you get a clear I think you get probably a more stable long-term upside with him, but like that's sort of the thing that I was thinking of. Tom Brady, another one. If you're a non-compete team, I think that's kind of the ideal guy. Older.
You want to get rid of Brady on that non-compete. But...
Oh, yeah. You want to get out of him right away. And that's a guy who was outperforming Russell Wilson even pre-injury, so that's the kind of guy that a contender would be interested in that you can move around with. Anyone else that we want to round this up with, or should we go to our last pick to you, Andrew, at the 112?
No, let's go to the last one, which is Darrell Williams' success speaks volumes. No, I'm not going to hate on CEH again. I just wrote that in there as sort of a joke, but it is sort of interesting to see that Williams seemed to perform fine in the role that they use him for, but I don't know, CH can't do that. Now, I want to talk about Khalil Herbert just a little bit. Had a game that I think everyone agrees is a pretty good start for him, but I can't help but think it feels eerily similar to fellow rookie Elijah Mitchell week 1. Elijah Mitchell was 19 for 104, and Khalil Herbert was 19 for 97. Each of them had one touchdown. Herbert had a few receptions too, but I think there's a lot of people that immediately I've been hearing about dreams of like, well, Williams isn't a long-term asset there, and Monty, his contract's up next year, so you could imagine in like 2 years, there's already that thought of like, with it by 2023, Khalil Herbert could be the guy, even though he's kind of the old man coming out. So I think he's the same age as Monty. All of that aside, I'd just like to pump the brakes on. I'm excited.
He is older, but
he's actually older than Monty. But I love seeing the success in him being used well in this offense when given the opportunity. But again, a cautiously optimistic thing. Let's see him do it a few times. Let's approach this the same way that I advised on Kadarius Toney when he had that first sort of productive week. We'll see where things go with him. We'll see when Williams comes back from COVID designation. We'll see what happens when Monty's back, when he comes back and stays healthy. See if they continue to work him in, how they like him. But it's nice to see him make the most of that opportunity. But that will be a crowded backfield. So I'm not expecting anything huge, barring any other injuries anytime soon.
Yeah, my thoughts on him was he actually worked well into the offense 2 weeks ago. He actually had more carries than Williams, but Williams more trusted in the pass game, which I think will continue when Williams is back. So I think Herbert still has play minus Monty, because I think he will get first and second down work because he's good there. And we liked him coming out, actually. I thought he was like a good back, like not necessarily great, but a guy who could play. He could play in the NFL, and he's probably ideally suited as a backup.
Just a professional runner.
Yeah, just a professional runner. I think we said that multiple times.
I just really like the correlation to the Mitchell performance, just because I feel like we almost had them grouped together as those two guys. We were like,
close,
we looked at all the other. We're like,
we did. Mitchell has kind of been the guy though for them when he's healthy. Though I just want to throw that out there.
Actually,
Mitchell
he should get all the work. He doesn't have competition there where Monty's.
Exactly.
When Monty
was that shade? Was that shade thrown at Trey Sermon? He doesn't have competition there.
Did you just read Trey Sermon?
Did you just read Trey Sermon? Was that a read? Shout out RuPaul, baby. I agree. Khalil Herbert is. I don't know how much long-term value he has. He feels like another one of these guys whose like high watermark is like Mike Davis type stuff, like where he's like. Sure. Comes in, fills in, Alex Collins type stuff, probably better. Like a good professional runner that teams are going to value, Jamal Williams type area, but not a guy who's ever really going to probably have a stranglehold on a job and be a feature back. That just seems like kind of his destiny.
Yeah, your worst case scenario if you're a Monty owner is he creeps into the workload where to a degree where he like vulture stuff. Like that would be the worst. Yeah. Where like he's just a presence.
He's getting like 80. He's getting like the Gus Bus like role where it's like 8 to 10 carries a game and too much goal line work.
That would be your fear. Like, oh no, we like what Herbert did, so let's mix them all in. And that's just.
I just think luckily Montgomery has some of that like blow up value where he can just bust out some of those huge plays that I think sort of take him over the top. That if he's still continuing to get that usage, there's always that chance. It's like a lesser version of what you see out of a Jonathan Taylor, who also has some of those physical tools and speed to match that blow up. But Monty's got it in some cases, and I trust him on that against the other guys there.
Iowa State product, David Montgomery. So I think it's a good place to end it. Let's I don't know why I had to throw out his college there, but it just seems to be what all the sports announcers do, where they're like, oh, and a great run by the Ohio State Buckeye.
You got Breece Hall now.
Breece Hall's the next guy coming out after that. It's a tree. It's coming out. I like Breece Hall better than David Montgomery profile wise coming out, but that's an argument we can have in the fall.
I feel like that's just a definitive way to close like the book on someone, is just to kind of give the alma mater and just be like, well, we're expecting great things out of that young Buckeye.
Yes, out of that young Minnesota golden gopher, fighting gopher, or whatever the fuck they're called. They have something stupid. The Nittany Lions, the Penn State Nittany Lions. Anyways, let's have some, just rounding out a few honorable mention. Just a few more injuries to talk about. Antonio Gibson is day to day. I believe he got it's had a lingering shin issue. So watch out for that. McKissick and Jared Patterson tend to be the guys that'll fill in there. I think McKissick's probably the guy you would want to play if Antonio Gibson's going down, particularly for the passing game volume. We also had a Latavius Murray injury in that Baltimore game. Fortunately, they have 17 other running backs to fill in should he miss any extended time.
More. We're just going to keep bringing it.
Yeah, exactly. Todd Gurley's still on the market there. Something like that.
They're like... just name off old guy. Who's it? Tim Hightower.
Tim Hightower. We can bring him back. The Richmond Spiders, baby.
Bring back Beanie Wells.
Beanie Wells. Yes. Beanie Wells, or I always just think of Beans from Even Stevens for some reason. Anyways, some other returns and debuts. Rashad Bateman had a modest debut, 4 for 29. But good to see him out on the field. Was involved, 6 targets. They didn't have to throw much in that game because the Chargers laid down. Dalvin Cook returned and looked great. That's nice to see him back from injury. And Tua returned. And I don't know what to make of his stat line was good, but they lost to the Jaguars and he only put up 20 points.
Jaguars, their first victory. So
yeah, he was pretty bad down the stretch of that game. And yeah, that was a weird game. And then also just a crisis alert still going on for Allen Robinson. We saw a little bit of signs of life from A.J. Brown, who was also on that crisis alert. But both those guys underperforming this year. More concerned about Allen Robinson because that does not seem like a high-volume passing offense at all. I like Justin Fields. He seems like he has a long way to go in the passing game. So we'll keep an eye on that. And any other stories, guys, that I've missed? Baker, we talked about his shoulder injury. Ryan Fitzpatrick could be on the way back sooner than later. That's good to see. I think that's just about it. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, no, get it all. Waddle, Tua connection's good.
Waddle was great, 10 for 70.
I guess.
Also a number on Robinson, wide receiver 55 as of this week.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Yeah, not good at all. But that's a good place to end it for today. So let's go around the horn and give our socials and all of our sort of plugs, starting with you, Jay. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Josh. You can find me at JC_DFF on Twitter. I write at goingfor2.com, so check me out there. Also do the Fantasy Cheat Sheet podcast. That is Friday nights at 8:30 Eastern Time at Going for 2 Live, or check out Going for 2 Live on YouTube. And you can find me there, so do that show as well. So check me out.
And thank you, Andrew. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm at Drewsy_music. That's for Instagram and Twitter. And also you can find all the music, like the music at the top. Hired Guns, that's for my band Ghosts in the Snow. Find all our stuff at ghostinthesnow.com. That'll lead you to Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Bandcamp, everywhere that you need to find stuff. And look, CEH, they don't trust him. They just don't trust him.
All right. You can find me at DFFJChris on the Twitters. Remember to subscribe to Brothers of Dynasty on YouTube, on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at Bros of Dynasty. We'll be back next Tuesday breaking down Week 7, where there is every good team in Dynasty and Fantasy on bye. So
much to talk about.
Gonna be a short show, guys, but we will be back. Maybe next week we'll find some more like Dynasty focused subjects to talk about, because it's gonna be a pretty disappointing week in the NFL. So we'll find some good stuff to fill the show with next week. So remember to tune in at 8:30 on the 26th. Thanks so much for listening, and have a good night.